Hey guys, what's going on? InsidiousSwede back again here for another YouTube video, and today we're gonna go over my top 10 favorite psychological manga series of all time. Now this is a very expansive genre, but it's definitely one of my favorites. And so I wanted to start off this new series idea that firstly I got from you guys as well from my manga haul video where I asked for video ideas. This one was definitely pretty high, do a top 10 list for a particular genre. So hopefully you guys enjoy. Again, it is a very big and expansive genre, so it took me a while to really narrow down my top 10, but I think I have it at a good spot, so let's get into it. Starting off, I want to do a couple honorable mentions, series that are fantastic and worthy of a mention in this video for being in that upper tier or upper echelon of psychological manga, but not quite good enough to make my personal top 10 list. Starting off, I have I Am a Hero, fantastic zombie apocalypse series. So thankful that Dark Horse put out a physical release to this manga. It's a fantastic series. I think the thing that really separates this manga from other series like it is that instead of focusing on the big picture, it really does an amazing job of just simply looking at one guy in one particular country and how he handles the end of the world, essentially. The other, of course, very unique aspect to this is he's also one of the few people in the country of Japan who owns a gun, and that really adds to the interest of the series. And then, of course, the best part being the psychological aspect about how he deals with being a man trying to survive the end of the world. Amazing manga, definitely worth a read if you haven't, but not quite good enough to be on my personal top 10 favorite psychological manga list. The second honorable mention I have is Jagan. Kind of a newer series. It didn't come out too long ago. As you can see, there is no current English release for it. Who knows if there ever will be. But again, another amazing series that is worthy of a mention on this video. The best thing about this series is that it focuses on a sociopath, a guy who has zero empathy for anybody else, and it's essentially his job to save the world, or at least his own country. And it's a fantastic look into a guy who just doesn't care while possessing the destructive power, of simple annihilation in his hand. Great series, great psychological elements to it, and truly a fantastic read. So definitely check it out if you haven't yet. And then the final honorable mention I have for today is The Promised Neverland. Now, of course, this is my Japanese copy, but on December 5th of this year, you can pick up your very own copy in English, finally. And it's really a fantastic example of a shonen manga that doesn't have to follow all of the standard shonen traits. So many fantastic things happen in the series that you just don't see from other shonen series, and honestly that's why I had to give it a nod here. It may not be quite as good as other series that I'll be talking about today are, but because it does so many amazing things for the shonen demographic that you just don't normally see, I wanted to mention it here again. It's essentially about a trio who have to fight their way through this orphanage that turns out to be this very corrupt entity with these creatures kind of lurking in the background. It's a lot of stuff going on in this series, and something that I cannot wait to get in English for sure. But that's gonna do it for my honorable mentions. Now let's get into the top 10. Alright, so at number 10 we have Tokyo Ghoul. You've already seen it on the screen here. And I do want to say one thing really quick as well. This is not a standard top 10 list, meaning Tokyo Ghoul is better than other manga on this series overall. I felt, though, that 9 other manga had a better psychological element to it. So keep that in mind. This is not a standard top 10 video. This is more of which manga does psychological better than one another. So again, a little bit different. Just keep that in mind, because I know for a fact out of the 10 manga here, Tokyo Ghoul is not 10th out of them. But getting back to it, this series does so many things very well, but of course I think the biggest and most important one to mention is, of course, our main character, Ken Kaneki. The kind of transformation that we see this kid go from being a simply docile college student to a guy who now has to feast on flesh for sustenance. It's such a very interesting look into the life of one kid who goes from being normal to one of the most abnormal creatures imaginable. Fantastic psychological elements, especially internal psychological elements to it. One of the best series currently out there, and definitely worthy of a spot on this list for sure. But I had it at number 10 simply because there are 9 other amazing psychological manga out there. So let's continue on. Alright, at number 9, I have a series that I'm hoping most of you have heard of by now. If not, I'm glad I'm exposing you to it, and that is Rikudo. Rikudo is a fantastic boxing manga that truly does psychological thriller perfectly. From the opening chapter to seeing our main character literally beat his father's dead body as it hangs from a noose, to the point where he's literally crushing skulls with his fists in professional boxing tournaments, to the kind of, again, psychological stuff that this kid deals with on a daily basis. There's just so much to Rikudo that really makes it fantastic in almost every way you could want. And, you know, beyond that, the supporting cast is amazing, from the mentors in his life that really have their own problems that they don't really, you know, deal with nearly enough, to the girl who he likes but has a hard time really dealing with those kinds of emotions. Again, it's a very internal look into the life of a young kid named Riku, and one of the best manga out there, period. So if you haven't read Rikudo yet, I'd highly recommend it, and definitely deserving of the 9th spot on my favorite psychological manga series of all time. At number 8, I have a series that I think a lot of you feel I don't like at all, which couldn't be further from the truth. But that manga is Gantz. Now, while I do believe this manga lost its way in the latter half of the series, you cannot deny the kind of psychological elements in this series that were really executed incredibly well. From the mystery shrouding, you know, the creature or being known as Gantz, to the kind of game-like aspect that these characters, you know, took part in. Some characters embraced it, became more powerful, and thrived in this situation of life and death, where others kind of folded under the pressure, didn't know how to handle it, and of course ended up getting killed. So it's a great series that takes a look at a lot of different personalities of various people, and it kind of shows how each individual would handle a situation like the one the characters were put in. Again, really great for, I'd say, the first 2 story arcs, but then from there, again, it just kind of lost itself. But overall, amazing series, and one more people definitely need to check out for sure. At number 7, I have Naoki Urasawa's Pluto. Now, I don't know how many of you would list this under psychological, maybe more like mystery thriller, but personally, I think there are so many great psychological elements to this series. For one, Naoki Urasawa is the king of suspense. He has this ability to make you be so engrossed in what's going on and what's going to happen next. And I feel like that really aids itself well to a series that has a lot of psychological undertones. Again, dealing with our main character, Gesich, being a detective, he has to spend his entire career and, you know, lifespan in this manga, essentially trying to figure out why his comrades are getting killed off one by one from something literally undescribable, and to see how far it goes up, the kind of, you know, people lurking in the background to this whole conspiracy, to how it ends. There's just so many great things that happens in this series that has to deal with the mind, figuring out what's going on, how things are happening, and that's why I believe, even though there are other genres this might relate to better, there are just so many great psychological elements to it that I wouldn't feel right leaving it off this list. So for sure, at number 7, I have Pluto. At number 6, I have a manga that I don't think I've talked a lot about on this channel, but that is Battle Royale. This is the quintessential survival island, survival of the fittest kind of story. If you haven't read of it or heard of it, think of it kind of like Hunger Games on steroids, and frankly, better in every possible way, from the incredibly gory, bloody, grotesque deaths to the incredible mind games that get played inside this psychological horror series. Just, you know, so many incredible things that go on in this series that just blow your mind half the time, literally and figuratively. Just an incredible series, a deep look into individual psyche, and, you know, again, kind of one of those series where you kind of find out what personality would thrive in a situation of chaos and which wouldn't. Again, really a fantastic series all the way around, and frankly, it's hard to find any better psychological series out there. I can only find 5, so let's get into those. At number 5, finally, this series seems to be getting the recognition it has always deserved, and that is Parasite. Parasite is one of my favorite manga of all time. So many things are done well and frankly perfectly in this manga that it was hard not to put it any higher. I decided to leave it here just at number 5 though, but the kind of things that Parasite does are just so incredibly interesting and intricate. But the one that stands out to me more than any other is the relationship between our main character Shinichi and his hand, Migi, right there, or Migi being Japanese for right. Just an incredible story. Really the thing that strikes me most about this title is how this parasite, whose job it was to come into Shinichi's body, take it over, and become a, you know, man-eating parasite alien on planet Earth, kind of changes into not only something that, of course, wants to fight for itself, but also wants to fight for a greater good. Just so many interesting things going on in this series. Almost like a what if. What if aliens came down and did possess humans? Would all of them just be out for blood? Or would some try to, you know, evolve and adapt into their new situations in a more docile manner? Just incredible all the way around. Although I do believe the manga is better than the anime, I'm really fortunate that the anime, you know, came out, because it really gave this story the exposure that it deserved. So at number 5, I have Parasite. At number 4, I have probably the most famous manga on this list, or at the very least, the manga that most of you have read. And I think some of you would have expected this to be a bit lower, but here it is. At number 4, I have Death Note. Now, I guess in general, I do believe a manga like Parasite is overall better than Death Note, but again, this list is more about what series does psychological, you know, elements better than one another. And so with that said, Death Note is the perfect example of how it's done correctly. The kind of mind games that Light Yagami and L play with one another is simply incredible. The writing in here is some of the best you're ever going to find. Truly a amazing series for what it is. And yeah, you could argue that the ending, or really the last couple of volumes, really did hurt this series as a whole. but you cannot deny the first half of this manga was some of the best writing you're ever going to find in any series. The suspense, the thrill, again, that psychological component of what's right and wrong, to kill murderers or not, truly amazing. And that's why it's here at number 4 on my list. Just Death Note, truly a great series, and one that I'm sure most of you have read by now. But yeah, at number 4, I have Death Note. Alright, at number 3, we have another Naoki Urasawa work, and that is Monster. This is one of the few series that I would give the title of masterpiece. There are very few manga that I would give that title to. This is one of those few. Truly a perfect series from start to finish. Of course, taking a young prodigal doctor in Dr. Tenma and turning him into a man on a mission to commit a single murder that could change the course of the world. It's really just this intricate plot from start to finish, detailing the rise and fall of this one man. And of course, the thing that really makes this series, the thing that really pushes this manga over the top, is the villain. And now again, I don't want to say any names because I feel like that's too much for a top 10 video in terms of spoilers. I will just say the villain in this series is the most deceitful, cunning, brilliant kind of antagonist you could ever hope for. The kind of genius that Naoki Urasawa pours into that character is simply incredible. And again, who doesn't love Naoki Urasawa's Monster? So at number 3, we have Monster. At number 2, we have a manga that's a little more unheard of, but it does have an English release. Unfortunately, it is very out of print. I figured I'd mention that before we got into it. But at number 2, we have No Longer Human. Now, this is actually a manga adaptation by a novel with the same name, and unfortunately I haven't read that one yet. One day I hope I can, but this series, out of all of the manga that I've talked about today, this one is one of the few I've ever read that I can safely say, if I don't know if I ever want to read this one again, ever. I've read it once, and I think I'm good. The way this series makes you feel, the way that it messes with your mind, the way that it makes you hate and, love the main character in so many different ways, these twists and turns. And I do want to show artwork, but there's a lot of things happening in this, so maybe we just drop down and find some better artwork. Alright, here we go. It's a series that really deals with a guy who doesn't like to show his true self. For the world, he kind of puts on a facade of who he actually is. And he really spends his entire life doing this, pretending to be somebody he's never been. And all of this internal struggle with dealing with the person that he wants to be and the person who he is, it's just so freaking interesting. And when you see him just turn into a person that almost from the beginning becomes unrecognizable, and all the drugs and the sex that he goes throughout his life. And I think the thing that really sells me on No Longer Human is like the final page. I'm not going to say more than that, but after reading No Longer Human, all 3 volumes in the same night, the ending to that 3rd volume just threw me for a loop. I wasn't the same for hours. I was just thinking about the story for longer than I normally would. It's just so damn good. I wish Vertical, the company who put out this manga, would do a reprint. I don't know if they really care. All I'll say is if you can ever get your hands on it, do it. But if not, at least read it online. It is more than worth it. So at number 2, for my second favorite psychological manga series of all time, I have No Longer Human. Alright, we're down to the last one. This is a series that I know a lot of you probably expected to be number 1 on this list. So unfortunately, no shocking surprise here, but at number 1, my favorite psychological manga series of all time is Berserk. Again, another masterpiece, hands down. Kentaro Miura really created something more than just special with Guts. And I don't need to get too far into this for a simple top 10 video, but with a character like Guts, the kind of hell that he goes through on a chapter by chapter basis, from the kind of stuff that he had to deal with as a kid to all of the people that he's lost, all of the relationships that have been torn apart, to the curse that he has been afflicted with for a very long time. Everything about this guy's life screams nothing but just living hell. It is the perfect example of how to make a psychological manga series as effed up as possible, and it's done perfectly. Truly, you know, a GOAT series. You know, one of those series that you're never going to forget. Hopefully one day we see an ending to it. Regardless, you cannot deny what's already been created here with Berserk. So, at number 1, for sure, my favorite psychological manga series of all time is Berserk. So, that's my list, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed. Keep in mind, I have not read every series of all time, so this is not, these are the best 10 psychological manga, period. No, no, no. This is my thoughts, my list, my interpretation of the manga that I've read. So if I've missed a few, or if you have great psychological manga series out there that you want to recommend to myself, but also people looking through the comments, definitely feel free to leave them down below. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching, but until next time, my name is InsidiousSwede. Take care.